Hi, I'm Larry DeBoer. I'm a professor in the Agricultural Economics Department at Purdue University and an extension specialist in state and local government public policy. I want to point out that there's a handout available for this talk, and you can find it at the address that you see on your screen there. And if you print out this handout, you can follow along with what we're saying here. What I want to talk about today, or in this video, are the school referenda. We have had, since November 2008, 42 school referenda. Of those 42, 18 have passed and 24 have not passed. Of those 42, 27 were capital referenda, and this is a new thing that we're doing in Indiana now. We're moving into the doing a capital referenda the way that most other states do it. But since November of 2008, if a local government, a school corporation in particular, wants to build a new building or refurbish an old building, they have to put the matter to a vote of the voters. And these are capital referenda. They can only issue the bonds and pay for those bonds with property taxes if the voters approve. We've had 27 capital referenda since November of 2008. 9 of them have passed and 18 have been defeated. But we've also had another kind of tax referenda. These are called the tax referenda. There have been 15 of these, and these are asking the voters whether the school corporation should be allowed to raise its general fund tax rate to pay for its operating costs, which are mostly teacher salaries and teacher benefits, essentially maintaining the number of teachers or increasing the number of teachers. And we've had 15 of those. So far, 9 have passed and 6 have not passed. On May 4th, 2010, there were 16 referenda, both of the capital and tax variety. 8 passed and 8 were defeated. If you take a look at the next chart, I've got a chart that shows the percentages, the percentage of yes votes in each of the 6 major periods of elections that we've had since November 2008. The thing you can notice most here, I think, is that in May 2010 we had 16 of these things. That's the most we've ever had in any one election cycle. But I think this is going to be the rule from here on in. I think we're going to see lots and lots of both capital referenda and tax referenda in the near future. I'm sure we'll have many of them this coming November, and we're going to have several special elections between now and then where school corporations will be asking the voters both for capital projects approval and also for new tax rates to shore up the general fund. One thing I'm trying to do as these referenda take place, we take a look at the next slide, is to ask the question, what seems to matter? Are there any patterns that we can identify? Is there anything that seems to explain why these referenda pass or why these referenda are defeated? So what I've done is to take a look at a number of different variables and using statistical methods to try to figure out what actually seems to make a difference. What kind of measurements could you use to explain, maybe even predict if we get lucky, what causes these referenda to pass and what causes them to fail? The first thing I tried was the tax rate, because you gotta expect that a higher tax rate will cause more people to vote no, and a lower tax rate might encourage more people to vote yes. This hasn't turned out to be the case yet. I'm certain that eventually, as we accumulate more data, as we see more referenda, eventually this thing will pan out. But especially in May of 2010, the tax rate didn't seem to explain it. Those referenda with higher tax rates were just as likely to pass as those referenda with lower tax rates. But we'll be watching this, expecting that it will eventually make a difference. One thing that did make a difference was whether the county in which the vote was taking place has local option income tax homestead credits. Those that have these homestead credits mean that the homeowners, who make up most of the voters, will pay the tax at a lower rate than other taxpayers because there's a tax credit, because the local income taxes are funding reductions in property taxes for homeowners. Turned out that school corporations that operate in counties that have these tax credits were more likely to have a higher yes vote. Two variables that also matter and that I expected to make a difference are debt service levy per pupil and the class size, the pupils per full-time equivalent teacher. The debt service levy, that's how much debt service have you already got on your books. If you've got higher debt service, that means you've already got a higher tax rate. It means you've already been to the well and are already paying for past capital projects. A higher debt service tax rate decreased the share of the yes vote. Class size seemed to matter as well. The higher the class size, the higher the pupil-teacher ratio, the more likely the referendum was to pass, the higher the share of yes vote. And this I interpret to be a measure of need. If people see that class sizes are big, that there aren't enough teachers to handle the student population, they're more likely to vote yes. Next thing that seems to matter is the composition of the tax base. School corporations that have a higher share of homesteads in the assessed value that they actually tax found that they had a smaller share of yes vote. Those that had a higher share of business property, commercial industrial property, had a higher share of yes vote, and those that had a higher share of commercial apartments had a really higher share of yes vote. That really seemed to increase the yes vote. And I interpret this to mean that since the voters are the owners of the homesteads, if homesteads make up a very large share of the tax base, homeowners have to foot the bill for the additional taxes and are therefore more likely to vote no. But if there's more business property, then folks other than the voters are paying a bigger share of the bill, and that encourages the voters to vote yes. Apartments not only is a tax base that foots part of the bill so homeowners don't have to, but apartments are also full of renters who may see themselves as not paying property taxes at all and may therefore be encouraged to vote yes, especially if they have kids in the school. So the composition of the tax base seems to matter. Next slide, some socioeconomic indicators seem to matter. Higher unemployment rates when the economy is not doing very well in the county in which the school corporation is located. It's a smaller share of yes vote, less likely to pass the referendum. Bigger share of students eligible for the federal lunch program increases the share of yes vote. That may be an indication of need, people voting yes more often if they see that there are more pupils who are in need of education and greater education expenditures. And then the share of pupils passing both of the I-STEP tests, that tends to increase the share as well. That may be people taking pride in their schools or seeing their schools as successful and being encouraged to vote yes to continue to fund their schools. Lastly, total enrollment seems to matter. So far, the bigger school corporations have a higher share of yes votes than the smaller school corporations. Now, this may be because the 4 referenda in school corporations that are really big, with 15,000 pupils or more, all pass their referenda. So we'll have to see in the future whether large school corporations find it easier to pass their referenda than smaller school corporations do. If they do, this might be an argument for school consolidation. If small school corporations have trouble passing their referenda, they may end up with aging capital plant, aging facilities, and may end up with higher class sizes and so forth. Perhaps that may become an argument if this continues for consolidation. What doesn't seem to matter yet on the next slide, these are things that I'll be continuing to look at, but don't seem to pan out as making a difference yet in the referenda. One is the proposed tax rate. One are capital referenda versus tax referenda. In Illinois, at least, capital referenda are more likely to pass. November elections versus other dates. Other research says that elections held on other dates than November tend to pass more easily. You'd expect places with higher income to vote yes more often, but that hasn't been the case yet. The share of the parents in the voting population, the share of retired people in the voting population, you'd expect that if more voters have a direct connection with the schools because they have kids in the schools, you'd get a higher yes vote, but we haven't seen that yet. We'll continue to check on that. So that was what we have to say about school referenda. Hope you found this informative. This is the last of the 4 of the videos that we're doing. Thanks for watching. I'm Larry DeBoer.